What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of At Home with Mark, Season 10, Episode 12. Yeah, 10 seasons, Adam. 10 seasons. Mr. Adam Levy's on the show. Adam, thank you so much for joining us and spending some time.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. I told you right before we went on air, so I've been a fan for a long time. I started this YouTube channel in the beginnings of the pandemic because all my gigs shut down. I'm sure you're very familiar with what happened for you too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you got to pivot, right? And we're improvisers, so that's what we do. But
Beautiful.
so I started this, and there was like a Mount Rushmore, more than 3 people, but Mount Rushmore of guitarists that I wanted to talk to, and you've been on that list the whole time. So I'm so happy to be speaking to you today.
Wow.
It's true. I can tell you. So I was 21 the first time I heard you playing, and I don't know what show it was with Nora, what you guys were playing on. It might have been an awards ceremony. It might have been like an Austin City Limits thing. I don't know when it was or what it was I saw you on. I knew I was like fresh graduated from college.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watch because my sister was a huge Nora fan, and so she played me that record, but I didn't know it was you. But I had heard Don't Know Why before, and you guys played it, and I saw you playing, and I was like, man, that is patience, that is melody, that is harmony, that is everything I aspire to be as a guitar player. And since then, just been kind of a fan just from the, outside looking in and watching what you've been doing. But you're such an inspiring player, and I want to get into the patience and how that came out and where you've come from with that and how that exudes from you as a player. But before we get there, I ask everybody this as my first question, Adam. What is your earliest musical memory? It's tough sometimes.
I remember like it probably had something to do with my family because my grandfather was a piano player, and he was an arranger professionally. He worked in music for television mostly. And so almost any time that we would go over to visit my grandparents, which was pretty frequent when I was a kid, he'd be playing the piano because it gave him such joy, even though it was his job. Like he loved to play. So probably my earliest musical memory would have something to do with hearing my grandfather play the piano.
Okay.
I don't have like a specific and it was this song, and it was a summer day, and I was but it probably was a summer day because me and my cousins spent a lot of summers at my grandparents' house. We'd get out of the pool and come inside, and he'd be at the piano, and we'd all gather around, and he would kind of scoot us off the piano bench because he didn't want dripping wet bathing suits on the piano bench. But the way that he played made a big impression on me because it was he was an arranger by trade. So the way that he played the piano wasn't like piano chops, but it was just like a real complete picture. You could hear like, okay, there's the melody, there's the bass line, there's some like stuff going on in the middle, and everything had forward momentum.
Man, okay. So you come by it pretty honestly then.
Yeah, I mean that he was really that's my first exposure to music. And later, driving around with my mom, she had a Ford, not a Mustang, but I'm trying to think what this little coupe was. Anyway, Maverick, yeah.
Oh wow.
Powder blue Maverick. And listening to she'd always have music on because she loved music. And so this would be like early 70s, I guess. So there'd be like bands like Little River Band and just hooky pop, and there's almost always a guitar solo or a guitar hook and vocal harmonies, the Eagles and stuff like that. That was what was in the air. So that's maybe the other kind of fork of my early musical memories, was just uh radio, early 70s LA pop radio.
And that, I mean, was that like in the heart of like the Laurel Canyon movement almost in a way around that time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Which of course I wasn't aware of as a movement because I was so small, but you would hear uh the hits of those songs. You for Joni, you'd hear like "Help Me," "I Think I'm Falling," or "Big Yellow Taxi," or um, "Circle Game." Those songs, uh, and you'd hear James Taylor, uh, and you'd hear Carole King. So yeah, I mean that all that stuff was. I didn't think of it at that time as like a thing. It was just, oh, well, that's what's happening now.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the first record you bought?
I do. I bought a 45, a single of Johnny Be Good,
Okay.
Chuck Berry, which I'm old, but I'm not that. It's like I didn't buy it in the 50s.
Right.
But somehow I became aware. I think because I was listening to the Beatles and I knew that they were into Little Richard and Chuck Berry and had covered some of those songs early on before they were writing their own songs. And I was at our local record store, and I had some like paper route, newspaper route money in my pocket, and I was ready to buy a record. And yeah, I was on the Mercury label. It was a dark blue label, and it was Chuck Berry singing "Johnny Be Good," and
Mm.
I listened to it, over and over again. And around the same time, I bought Buddy Holly, "That'll Be the Day."
Such a good tune.
Yeah.
Man. You know what's funny too on this show? I can't tell you how many people. I mean, I'm at 240, 250 episodes at them. I can't tell you the amount of guitar players that cite Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future playing that song as their catalyst to
Oh,
pick up the
wow.
instrument. So I
Right.
mean, it's a seminal tune. You can't avoid it as a guitar player.
Right. Right. And it really spans. That's an interesting point because it spans generations. If you're a little older than me, like I actually didn't. I'm embarrassed to say this. I didn't see Back to the Future when it was in theaters. I don't have a good reason why I didn't. But I never did. I've seen it subsequently, rented it and stuff. But if you're a little older than me, you might have actually like remembered when Chuck Berry was on the radio, and then that had a whole other life, through the Beatles and then through Back to the Future. And it's uh, last year, I remember my friend Rich Hinman and Rich is a dear friend and a musical brother of mine. We play in a band together, and we sometimes go through these long text chains of what are you listening to and stuff. And both of us got into this Chuck Berry thing about a year ago. And it's like, well, it's one of those things people take for granted because, oh, it's a thing. It's a Chuck Berry thing, whatever. But it's like, okay, but how about just sit down and listen to 5 songs in a row or 10 songs in a row and go past the hits and dig deep. It's it's really remarkable, like how great it is and how much music that still happens today, if you trace it back, comes out of that guitar language, the way double stops and bending strings. And
Mm-hmm.
um it's really incredible. I get that it's easy to kind of dismiss it as, we all put things in little boxes, I guess, to some extent. Oh yeah, oh, that's a bebop thing, oh, that's a folk thing or whatever. But it's like, it's good to go back and actually spend time and dig in and really pay attention to what's there. It's really great.
And I'll be honest, I probably haven't dug in deep enough with Chuck Berry, and I know I should, because I feel like there's a reason his stature is what it is, because I feel like everyone regards him as kind of being ahead of his time, just like Hendrix in his own way, you know?
Yeah, totally. He really was like that, and also lyrically really inventive, um, great lyric writer. Uh, yeah, do that, Mark. I think
Yeah,
I think you'll dig it. I want to ask you a question, if that's okay.
sure.
I'm curious who you said that I would be on your Mount Rushmore. Who else is on your Mount Rushmore? Who are your big guitar?
I've had
Uh,
a couple of them.
okay.
So Charlie Hunter
Mm,
has been on the show.
mm,
Um, Wayne Krantz is one of my absolute favorite guitar players of all time.
yeah.
There's something about, and I interviewed Wayne not for this show. I have a funny story about that, but I interviewed him for Berkeley when I was still living in Boston, and because I work for Berkeley as my day job, but I interviewed him for that, and then I saw him years later, and he remembered me. I was like, oh my god,
Huh,
because he's like been my hero.
sure.
But I emailed him during the pandemic, and I was like, hey Wayne, like I just started doing this thing. Remember how I interviewed for Berkeley, blah blah. And he's like, yeah, I'm not really doing that right now. Maybe next pandemic. It's like,
That's
this is
so Wayne.
so
That's like
Wayne.
that's the most Wayne thing. I love it.
So Wayne. But what I love about him, and you can tell me what you love about him, but I think the thing that really draws me or drew me in initially, because it's not for everybody. I mean, I took my wife to see him in Northern Virginia, and she was like, "Oh my god, I had to." It was so much chaos happening. I had to like go to the bathroom to get out of there. She's not really a fusion head or a jazz head or anything, but I find him so interesting rhythmically, like what his right hand does and the counterpoint in his left hand is just mind blowing. And I've always aspired to kind of, when I'm improvising, I think of like rhythmically instead of melodically almost,
Mhm.
because I love playing drums too. So it's like I hear that stuff. But what do you take from him?
Mm. I think when I first heard him, it was actually his chordal approach that I found really interesting. This was, I think, "Long to Be Loose" might have been the first record that I heard,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know where he was coming from chordally. It sounded very modern and fresh, both in the voicings, one at a time, but also how he strung harmony together. I thought was really interesting. And then, almost in a Holdsworth kind of way. I mean, I know that's not what Wayne is known for, but there's moments of that kind of chordal, sus2, not typical shapes, but just intervals. Like he approaches harmony just as intervals, and he approaches melody also just as intervals.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I know from his book and also talking with him, it's very intentional. Like he doesn't want to lean on the stuff that we think of as like jazz language or fusion language or rock language, even though he knows all that. I mean, he can play all that stuff, but he's developed this voice on the guitar that's intentionally devoid of the stuff that we come to expect, but at the same time he's got all the chops that one who could play that has. um, and then the stuff that he got into after that, which was the kind of turn on a dime stuff where the band would be doing something and then it would just kind of jump cut to something else. And I think that, from my understanding, that started from actual edits, from editing live recordings,
Mm-hmm.
and then deciding, oh, what if we could, let's see if we can just do that. We don't need to do that in the editing room. Let's just do it live. And um, his sound is great. I saw him at the 55 bar a bunch of times, and was always kind of like loud, but not in a like loud in a really good, satisfying way. I saw him play there with a Marshall Jubilee, and yeah, just going for stuff and really connecting with his rhythm section. The way that he plays with a rhythm section, I think, is um, notable. He's not just floating over the top, but he's very integrated in the rhythm section. Even when he's playing melody, he's like kind of pushing against them, even as they push against him. And it's really cool.
Yeah. When you saw him in the 55 bar, was he playing that Jubilee through a 412?
Mm. I think so. It might have been a half stack, but
It's crazy. In that
yeah,
little bar.
I know.
It's so crazy.
I know. That's a good question. I can't remember that. I'll have to ask Wayne.
Man. Who did you see him with in terms of, I know you said you saw him several times, but was it always Tim and Keith, or was it like Cliff and Tim, and like who did you see him with?
Oh, all kinds of rhythm sections. I think I saw him where Anthony Jackson was playing bass
Oh,
at
heck
least once. And yeah, for sure with Keith and Tim. But I can't even remember because it's a spread out over a lot of years.
yeah. I will say this. They're the only band that has ever made me stop breathing and like lose my breath because I was so in it. You forget you're breathing. It's kind of like when you're watching like a movie that's suspenseful, that someone's underwater and they're like tied up and you realize you're not breathing.
Yeah,
My wife and I will do that all the time. We'll be watching a movie and we're like, is everybody breathing? Breathe. Don't forget to breathe.
I love
But
that.
like, I just remember seeing them the first time I saw them live and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not breathing. And it was right when that Krantz Lefebvre Carlock record came out.
Mhm.
And I think they were playing Rushdie, that song Rushdie. And that was like one of my faves on that record. But I also saw them play at Sullivan Hall. I like took a train down from Boston by myself and was like, I have to go see them in New York. If I can't see them at 55, I need to go see them in New York. And man, that was just a trip. They were taking all these risks and doing all this really fun stuff and having fun doing it. And I think that is what made me realize it's possible to do acrobatics and still have fun. And it's okay if you fall on your face.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, I guess I love that stuff about Wayne as much as the music itself. It's just that spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to answer your question, yep, those two. Schofield would be one, maybe one day. I don't know. We'll see.
Mm.
But you're up there, and there's many more too that I could probably name off. Mike McCready from Pearl Jam. Pearl Jam
Oh
was
yeah.
like was the reason is the reason I play guitar. And I'm so diverse in stuff that I listen to, but he's the main reason I picked up the instrument for sure.
Mm. Mm.
Well, let me ask you. So growing up adjacent to LA, do you feel like, because I hear a lot of stories from people about how maybe that was an advantage in the entertainment industry for them, it was a detriment to them. Like, how did it inform your decisions to want to pursue music as a pathway?
Well, yeah, it was kind of a strange time because I came up, when I was a kid, going to the studios with my grandfather and seeing, um, again, not record dates. Like we're not talking about um, stuff you'd hear on the radio. He worked in television and mostly on variety shows where they would have a live band, but they would pre-record some things. And so I saw what being a musician could look like, probably in a really different way than most young people who are curious about music. Like I actually got to be inside a room with people, with professionals. These were folks, that were in the musicians union and showed up mostly daytime work. They all showed up in shirts and ties. They all showed up early. Um, I thought that that was what show business was. I didn't know anything about touring or even making records, because that's a different thing too. So it gave me an opportunity to see what that could be like. But at the same time, by the time I was, proficient enough and reliable enough as a young man to start doing session work, it was already the mid '80s, and things were so different. Like I uh, I had seen sort of the last part of what had long been this era that was my grandfather's era of music. And then, what was happening at that point already was like, you know, it wasn't Tommy Tedesco, it was Steve Lukather
Mm-hmm.
and Dan Huff and those guys, which wasn't actually, I didn't really get that world at all. I didn't um so it's hard for me to relate to. It was just changing, and then home studios were already kind of starting to happen, and so it wasn't necessarily the best time to choose to become a session musician in a way. If I'd been born 20 years earlier, I think I would have fallen more easily into it. But it was kind of a changing time, and it was also a high bar. Like my grandfather had done really, really well for himself, and I thought, if I'm going to do this, I need to really achieve. And it was kind of intimidating. Uh, at the same time, all of the musicians that I met through him were super nice and, um, you know, really cool to this young kid who was hanging around and trying to figure out how it all worked. So, I don't know. I mean, it did make me want to go to music school, which I did. I went to a school called the Dick Grove School of Music. So I wanted to understand music more before I tried to dive into it. But yeah, I don't know. The upshot of it is, like, most of my musical life hasn't been sessions. I mean, people might know of me as a session guy because I've played on some well-known records, but if you made a pie chart of my musical life, much, 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 much more of it would be on stage
Mm-hmm.
at whatever scale, whether it's, a neighborhood uh, bar with a dartboard, or, on tour with a big artist, flying around, and, all that stuff. Like, and I was really unprepared for that. Uh, I,
Mm.
I, I thought I would find myself as a studio musician, and really where I landed, or at least where the work landed for me, was live, playing live, which I had no vision of that from my experience of being around my grandfather.
Mm-hmm. Did any of his wisdom in the industry, or any of his even like piano harmonic knowledge, did he impart any of this to you? Is this something that you guys would talk about, that you would learn from him about arranging music?
Um, that's a good question. I don't think he ever wanted to really directly teach me stuff. Like, I don't ever remember, like, him getting out a score pad and showing me, like, okay, this is how you would voice for, trumpet and trombones or whatever. Like, but over and over again, just by giving me feedback on my own arrangements, or, just paying attention to what I was doing or where my curiosity lied. I mean, I think he really emphasized that melody is where it's at. When you go to music school, you learn voicings. Sorry, I just had some dental work done earlier, so
You're fine.
I'm still kind of like, Um, uh, you learn voicings.
Mm-hmm.
And in his generation, he was born in the teens, and really learned just on the job. He started playing professionally as probably, I don't even know how old he was, but he was young. Um, nobody of his generation, I don't think, was thinking about voicings. They might have like a couple of things they had worked out that they would, you know, were kind of their hot things, but it was all melody. Voicings was just the result of melodies. So he was coming at it from that way. And I remember him telling me that a friend of his who was an arranger would like arrange the whole thing in his head before he ever picked up a score pad. And sometimes wouldn't even use a score pad. He had it all in his head, and he would just he'd write out the lead trumpet part on a piece of manuscript paper. And then
Oh man.
he'd get out another, and he'd write out the second. He would just, it was all like that, which is not how they teach you in music school. It's much more formulaic. Like, okay, here's what you do when you have 2-part harmony. Here's what you do when you've got 4 trumpets or whatever. And there's value in that as well, of course. But the thing I think that he imparted, as far as like real nuts and bolts musical stuff, is like melody, 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 melody.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as like the business, not really. I mean, he was just really practical. So, I mean, I could say things that I learned from him, but they really, I don't think they're going to knock you out of your chair. They're just like, this is a guy that grew up in the Depression, figured out how to make a living playing piano and writing music, and supported his family. And,
Man.
he was coming at it from a really different place than, me in the late 70s, early 80s, growing up in the suburbs of LA, with lots of familial support and,
Right.
But I will say that one thing that he never ever said to me, like, hey, pay attention to this, but that I noticed was like, he did a lot of social things with his musical, the guys that he was doing business with, musical business. He also found a lot of opportunities to play golf with them, or like they started a club. They started this arrangers club called ASMAC that would get together once a month at this restaurant in LA, and they would just roast each other.
I love it. Love it.
And they would like write parodies of each other's famous songs, but roasting each other,
I mean, that's some effort. That's good friendship.
Yeah.
If you're taking that much time.
Yeah. So he taught me that's a part of it. And even before, I went to some of those meetings, and even just going and watching him in the studio, seeing how they related to each other.
Mm.
I always thought that, that was a big part of music, was because I've met people that would say, man, I don't care if somebody's a jerk or difficult or what, like if Cat can play, then let's play. And my grandfather would not, that's not how he would work when he was the musical director. It's like the people that he surrounded himself with were cherry picked. Of course, they had to be able to play, but there was also a kind of esprit de corps that was really important to him.
You can't suffer fools. It's like the antithesis of what B.B. King used to say about like how he'd rather have someone that's coachable and that's a good person that shows up on time and is respectful and all that than deal with some hot shot who can blow,
Totally.
So that makes sense. Well, it seems like you've learned a lot of valuable lessons from him, maybe inherently without you even realizing it at the time. But I mean, I always think I'm so curious about that because I don't have anything like that in my family. Like I was the black sheep. I mean, my grandfather like dabbled in cowboy chords and stuff, but I didn't have anybody that I could be like, what's this? Or can you show me this? Or can we even speak about music?
Right.
Like I didn't even have that. So anyone that has some sort of mentor figure in their life that can have a large impact, it's a big leg up to really kind of understand music at a younger age, even. Because how old were you when you started kind of wanting to get into the session scene? Because like that whole Danhoff, Landau, Lukather. I mean, that was like, I'm sure that it was just saturated with those cats were the guitarists in town.
Right.
So how old were you when you're trying to compete with that?
19, 20, something like
Damn,
that.
Adam, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is absolutely crazy, because I can't even imagine trying to wrap your head around, how do I even break into this? Like,
Right.
how do I even get on the 5 deep call list? You know
Right.
what I mean? If this person and this person, and this person, and this person can't do it, I'm available, you know?
Yeah. And, in retrospect, I'm sure there was a lot more that I could have done, but I was very intimidated and didn't have a lot of confidence. And, playing the way those guys played felt like a total foreign language to me. I was still thinking about the Beatles and the Eagles and, um, you know, the stuff that I had kind of grown up on, and I wasn't tuned into contemporary music in a way. So yeah, it was tough, and mostly I was just young and didn't have it together. It took me a few years, honestly. I mean, I left LA a few years after this and moved to San Francisco,
Mm-hmm.
not for the music scene, but because I was in love with. It had to do with life, not music,
Mm-hmm.
and in a way, that was what kicked my ass and made me start intentionally making stuff happen. Because the other thing in LA is, like, it was my hometown, and it was kind of, yeah, I could make more calls, I could do more hustling, but I can do that tomorrow. But in San Francisco,
Amen, brother.
yeah, in San Francisco, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know a soul. So if nothing was ever going to happen, like, ever, unless I went out and started knocking on doors and going to jam sessions and getting people's numbers and cold calling and um, being out on the scene. Like, I had to do it. But that was a few years after I graduated music school, and then the San Francisco scene really didn't have much to do with recording. Again, it was more of a live scene, so that got
Mm-hmm.
me out of the house and got me working.
Mm-hmm. It seems like San Francisco, I mean, from what I understand, I just had Will Blades on like about a month ago, and we were talking about like the Boom Boom Room and all the stuff that's happening in San Francisco and has happened, because in high school, maybe it was high school, because I mean, I grew up on the jam band scene too, so I
Mm,
was exposed to, Medeski Martin Wood and the Gray Boy All Stars and stuff like that. And that whole San Francisco West Coast, being from the East Coast, that West Coast Boogaloo thing was extremely attractive to me.
yeah.
So I mean, was that what was going on? Is that the kind of gigs you were doing as a young buck there? Like, were you doing like funk, jazz, fusion type stuff?
And no, you would think so, but I was kind of a square, I guess. Uh, like, yeah, there was, like, Charlie Hunter Trio was around, and Alphabet Soup was a band that was really amazing around that time, and Will Bernard had
Mm,
different incarnations with his bands, and um, I was friendly with all those guys. I'd come out to their gigs, they'd come out to my gigs, but uh, at first I was playing a lot. I became known as an accompanist for jazz singers, and there
mm,
was, this wasn't happening at the Boom Boom Room, but there was a few clubs that would hire singers, and most of the time it was just duos, vocal and guitar, and Tuck and Patty was really hot at that time, and that was a Bay Area phenomenon. So a lot of singers were inspired by that and wanted to work with guitar players, and that. So I did a ton of those gigs and played with a few singer songwriters. Nobody that you would have heard of, but some really amazing, interesting writers. So I was always kind of living in both of those worlds. I was a jazz guy and a supportive singer-songwriter guy, which is probably what led me to, eventually get to play with Tracy Chapman in around 95 or something like that. But leading up to that, um, yeah, I was just on the Bay Area. Oh, there was another band called the Brown Fellinis. They didn't have a guitar player, but that was a great trio. I don't know if you heard about them.
No, I didn't.
It was tenor sax, bass, and drums. Super funky, really creative.
Mm,
Um, a really beautiful sound. I don't even know if they put out records or if they did, how much it would translate. But being in the room when those guys were playing was amazing. I love that band.
mm,
Yeah, I don't know.
mm.
I just like I wasn't that into funk or acid jazz. Um, I like the early Grant Green records, and I don't not like the later Grant, but it just wasn't where my head was at. I was
Mhm.
still processing all the stuff that I had learned at music school and stuff I'd learned with Ted Green. And even though I was a young buck on paper, I was kind of an old soul in my heart. So those were not the gigs for me. I was playing mostly standards, and eventually I put a group together and started writing my own music. But then that was coming more out of um, what I was hearing from New York. Like when I started write when I around 92 or 93, I was like, I'm tired of standards. I want to make some music that I can claim as my own. But I was listening to more like Bill Frisell
Oh,
and
man.
and Ben Monder. I had heard this record that Ben Monder made with Mark Johnson. It was called Right Brain Patrol. And Bill and John Schofield had also had a band with Mark Johnson called Bass Desires. And so I was compositionally, I was influenced by those sounds and those records, and I completely bypassed the groove in that kind of way.
Yeah. You know what's interesting too is, I mean, I hear the Bill Frisell in you at times, obviously, and we have a mutual friend in Adam Miller. I'm good buddies with him, and the first time I saw him play, he was doing something with Premier Guitar, and it was live, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this guy definitely listens to Bill Frisell. I can hear it." And then they said, "Oh, this guy just said this." He's like, "Oh my god, yes, like
Yeah,
that's my guy," kind of thing.
yeah,
But that record, that East West record, that Grapevine, oh, the first time I heard that, and that's what I hear in you is like Bill's patience
hmm.
on that track. There is a Grand Canyon worth of space in that track. And that's what I admire so much about you is your willingness to let the space happen. Because it is true. It's like more happens when nothing's happening almost. And
Yeah,
and the way that you voice lead, I mean, you can tell that you're schooled and that you understand the fretboard, but it's not in a showy way. It's like, I'm going to connect the dots here and support the song. And I guess that's what comes from playing in duos in San Francisco and cutting your teeth, carrying it. So,
yeah, yeah.
man,
I'm reading. I was going to hold it up and show you, but I don't. It's not at hand. But I'm reading this book now. It's the Notebooks of Sonny Rollins. Have you read this?
I have not. I mean, obviously know who Sonny is, but
Yeah, and it's just. I mean, it's three different eras. There's some stuff from the late '50s, and then there's some stuff from a little bit later, and then there's some stuff that's you know almost contemporary to now, but not quite. And it's just little journal entries, and some of it's just one line. And there's a thing that I read this morning when I was having my coffee. He said, never miss a good opportunity to shut up,"
nice.
or something like that. And I assume he meant that socially, but also musically. I feel like that's true. Like, um, I remember Jim Hall. I read a quote of his where he said, "Don't just do something, sit there." And my if I am a patient guitar player, I think, yeah, I owe a lot to Bill and to Jim Hall. And I want to hear what's going on. Like, and a lot of times I have to either slow way down or stop to hear what other people are doing or hear what it all sounds like. I have kind of a slow uh, metabolism, like a emotional metabolism, and also in real life too. But I
Yeah.
have kind of a slow musical metabolism, and so I'm not trying to force the music to be like I'm not. I don't feel like I'm trying to be subversive or whatever, but it's just what I need. Like I want to listen more than I want to hear myself, and I want
Mhm.
to um, see what happens. Uh, I'll tell you one other thing about my grandfather. Maybe this also tells you something about where I think comes from. It's like he told me a story once. He was at some big gala event, and Frank Sinatra was there, and there was a house band with a piano trio or whatever. And Sinatra wanted to sing "Old Man River," which is an old song that people used to like to sing. And he comes over to my grandfather backstage. He says, "Hey George, do you know Old Man River? I want to sing it, but I'm not crazy about this piano player. Do you know it? You want to play with me?" And my grandfather said, "Yeah, sure. No rehearsal, whatever. Frank just told him what key. Okay, cool." Grandfather gets out there, plays the first A, "Oh man," and then plays the second A, and then the bridge comes, and my grandfather just blanks, cannot think of how it goes. And he's on stage, just him and Frank Sinatra, in front of a big audience. And he told me this story. I wasn't there, and he told me I just took my hands off the piano and I waited for 8 bars, and Frank sang, and I came back in nice and strong on the last A. And afterwards, applause, applause. They walk off stage. Frank said, "Great job, George. Thanks so much." That's it. And, maybe that's because he told me that story more than once. And, maybe that's a lesson I learned from him. It's like, it's okay to just, like, when you stop playing, the music doesn't stop. I would even argue that if you're playing a solo jazz guitar gig, when you take your hands off the strings, there's still some vibration in the room. And at least for a few moments, there's some expectation in the listener's mind of like, okay, well, something else is going to happen.
Right.
So it's not like a record where when you lift the needle off of the vinyl, like it stops. Like in a room where music is being made, taking your hands off the strings for a beat or a bar or 8 bars or whatever, there's plenty often there's plenty going on.
Mhm.
And then when you come back in, that you're really, it's like intermittent fasting or something. It's like,
Mhm.
music needs space. When music doesn't have space, I'm not interested.
Yeah. So you never ever in the history of playing the instrument were concerned with burning bebop lines, 16th notes. Have you ever wanted to shed on that stuff, or you're always like, ugh, no, thank you?
When I was young, uh, e- I tried. I mean, even before I got really into jazz, I was listening to, there was a band called the Dixie Dregs.
Mm-hmm.
And man, Steve Morse just was super blazing. And I did try to figure that stuff out. And I was listening to Holdsworth IOU. And uh, by the time I got really interested in jazz, I mean, I did learn a couple of Charlie Parker solos. I learned his chorus of Yardbird Suite. I learned
Oh, wow.
when I was a teenager. And so, yeah, I was curious about it, but it never was the reason. Um, that was just not ever the part of music that I mean, when I did that stuff, it was just because that's what you had to do to play with people. I mean, even like when I was in high school and I was just playing rock tunes, like people wanted to play Rush. Like some of that's pretty technical, you know.
What Rush tune were you guys playing?
Well, I was in a band that we played YYZ,
Whoa, man, nice.
and that same band also played Closer to the Heart, which is not technical, but that's, you know, so that stuff was hard to play, but I didn't love it, but I just wanted to play with people, and so that was the cost, or not the cost, but that was what it took to have a band in high school. Was like, well, we're going to play these Rush songs or UFO songs, you know, or you know,
Oh,
you had,
wow, man.
you know, and so, but at home, like on my own time, I was much more interested in like Jeff Beck, because we've ended as lovers, like, you know, really emotive guitar. Like I wanted to make the guitar really talk. 16th notes just weren't that interesting to me.
Mhm. When we were living in Boston, you'll love this because talked about my wife who's not a musician, who was like she would prefer to listen to like Appalachian like bluegrass all day, like
Yeah.
that's her vibe. But we went to Wally's, which is that jazz club right off campus,
Yeah.
and that's like right when I started going to school there because we were 28. I went to school there when I was older,
Okay.
and so we went in and we sat down and like this is the place to see jazz, like on around campus kind of thing. And we sat down and just these young kids get up there and they start playing. They probably weren't even 21, I bet. And at the end, this guy's just burning. He's just like burning for 32 bars, just straight 16ths. Like, and at the end of the song, everyone's like, woo, and everything. My wife leans in. She's like, I don't understand that. He didn't say anything to me. And I was like,
Right.
ooh, damn. Like, she even knew, like, that was too much. Like, why did you do that kind of thing?
Right.
And there is prowess. I'll never be able to do that. I'm not like a shreddy dude, but like there's something about what you do. And like you were saying earlier, I feel like you have this soulful approach to the instrument. Even when you're doing like avant-garde stuff on the records that you've put out that I've listened to for years, it's just like it's still soulful. It's still saying something. There's still a sentence happening, you know, every bar, every two bars. There's something that's being said to me. And I think that is what speaks to so many people on how you teach and how you play.
Hmm.
And it comes through. I mean, for me, it's always come through about you, even before talking to you. So,
Oh man. Well, that's nice. You know what? When I was, I'm thinking like, you know, when I was young and maybe could have gotten more into fusion. Like I remember I saw the Chick Corea Electric Band when their first record came out. But you know, I had already been listening to a lot of like the Crusaders and Grover Washington, and that stuff really spoke to me. It felt um, like people were saying something.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's a hard thing to do with the instrument. There's a level of musical maturity I think that has to happen for a lot of people, myself included. Like, I feel like not until I was in my 30s did I really start to think about that stuff. And I'd been playing since I was 12. So it's like, why did it take me this long to even consider that? You know what I mean? Because I think like the catalyst like early on was like hearing people like you and then when you hear somebody like Wayne and you're like, whoa, that's so different. You know, it's just like, where's the in between? Where do I live? Because I'm not trying to be, you know, Derek Trucks or Adam Levy or Wayne Krantz. I want to be my own person, but what do I take from all these things I love and still serve a song? You know, it's
Yeah.
tough. It's a tough thing to do.
Yeah, but it is the thing to do, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah, I mean that's part of it too, and I know I've said this in other interviews, but I'll say it again, which is that when I first moved to New York in the mid '90s, like everybody was burning.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, Ben Monder, who I mentioned, and Wayne and Adam Rogers, and
Oh,
you know
that too.
Kurt Rosenwinkel, and I mean this stuff. you didn't have to go to the Blue Note to hear these people. I mean, these guys were just around, like playing all kinds of little gigs here and there. And it's just like, okay, well, this is what I've landed in, you know.
Yet again, it's like LA.
Exactly.
It's like, what am I
Exactly.
doing?
Exactly. Because in LA, you had like what we were saying, like, Landau and Lukather, and then you also had like Scott Henderson and Frank Gambale and Robin Ford, and like just guns ablazing. And then I was like, okay, moved to San Francisco. Things were pretty chill actually in San Francisco. There are some incredible guitar players there, but that wasn't so much the scene. There's a lot more Jerry vibes.
Yeah, I can
you
get
know,
down with that.
and jam band, like Mother Hips and stuff like that. And then I moved to New York, and I was like, the reason I moved to New York, I was, fascinated by Bill and all the stuff I was hearing coming out of like the Knitting Factory vibes and um, uh, the Lounge Lizards and Mark Rebo and stuff. But I got here and like, okay, well, that exists, but also there's just, the guys I just mentioned. I was like, okay, I can't play like that. So I had to very quickly define myself, or get a job. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, there's that too. There's that too.
Or both, but it
Mhm.
was that was really a foundational moment for me. It's like arriving in New York when I was about 30 when I moved to New York. And I was like, okay, time to uh, be a grown up and find your thing. And so, I'm still finding it, now another 20 years later, or almost 30, whatever. I moved to New York in 96.
Mm.
So I was 30 then. And next year, in whatever, 2026, I'll be 60. So I'm still trying to figure it out,
Isn't that funny? It's just a lifelong thing. I
but
think that's what's great about music, though.
yeah,
It's never boring, right?
it is never boring. And in a funny way, like this phenomenon I'm describing of like always, in the neighborhood where I live, which is called Flatbush, and it's on the cusp of Ditmas Park. I run into Near Felder at the coffee shop all the time. That dude is blazing. I run into Miles Okazaki on the street. I ran into Bill at the supermarket the other day. He lives in this neighborhood. Incredible guitar, but it doesn't anymore feel like uh, nobody's trying to cut anybody else. It feels at this point, I guess, just everybody's at a different point in their life.
Mhm.
It's just a big brotherhood,
That's
and I'm
awesome.
glad that I stuck it out long enough to get to this point. I can't play any faster than I could 20 years ago, but I found a way that I can hang, you know, that feels good, and people, I guess, seem to like it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know they do, they do. I mean, I think, there is something to be said for mutual respect amongst great players, and, in a scene like that, when you're, and the perseverance, like you're saying, like, for you to, like, have alright, there's no plan B. This is what I'm doing. I'm playing guitar. It has to work, you know? I have so much respect for that, because that is a tough line to toe, and I'm sure there was a lot of tough times, and I'm sure there was a lot of great times.
Yeah.
And that alone, kudos to you, my friend. I mean, like, just pushing through it all and, like, and becoming what you've become as a player, it's really cool. It's very fun to see.
Thanks.
Um, we're running out of time. I want to ask you about this new record coming out next month,
Okay.
because I'm a huge Dawes fan. In fact, Griffin was on the show, along with several other the cats from Dawes, and he's one of the most inventive drummers on the scene these days. I'm sure you know that.
I do.
So how did you get to know Griff, and, like, tell me a little bit about what this record's all about?
Yeah. So, I guess, I live in New York now, but I was living in LA for a few years prior to the pandemic. And I played with Griffin once or twice just some informal jam sessions that somebody put together. And I always thought he was really cool, and I was a fan of the band for sure. Um, actually, uh, before I played with Griffin, I think I got Taylor to play his brother's a great guitar player
Oh
to
yeah.
play on a song of mine. Um, it's not on a record, but you can find it on YouTube. Uh, anyway, so I knew Griffin a little bit from some jam sessions, and then fast forward maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was at the what's Michael League's festival in Miami called? Is it Ground Up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I was at the Ground Up Festival and I saw Griffin playing with Madison Cunningham, which is not a gig that he normally does, but he was there with her. And I thought he sounded amazing with her. I was just like, wow. Uh, so I had his number on my phone and I just sent him a message like, Griff, we have to play some music together. I'm just really, I love, he didn't even know I was there. So I said, I'm here. I just saw you with Maddie. We got to figure out a way to play together. So the next time I was going to LA, at that time, Griffin was curating this kind of these improvisatory sets at this little club called ETA, which was a great club in LA. And he said, let's just play duo. Come, we're not going to rehearse. We're not going to talk about it. Just come out when you're here and we'll play on a Tuesday night or whatever it was. And we'll just play free and see what happens. And I was really excited about that. And a couple weeks before I was supposed to go out there, the club closed down.
Ah.
So Griffin's like, well, what should we do now? And I said, well, there's a place that I like to play when I'm in LA. It's this little place called 1642. And one thing led to another, and he's like, well, why don't we add a bass player? And why don't we play some of your tunes? And I was kind of surprised that it took that direction. It had gone from like just us totally freestyle to like, let's make it an Adam Levy gig. And, so I asked my friend Alan Hampton to play. And as soon as those two guys started playing together, I was like, oh my God, this is an incredible band. Like just from beat one, there was something. Uh, and so that was a show that we played, and we just played a lot of my music. And before the end of that gig, I said to those guys, like, okay, we're going to make a record. I don't know what it's going to be like, but we're going to make a record. And then I mentioned that to my friend Chris Bruce, who's a great multi-instrumentalist and producer. And I said, I want to make a record with these guys, but I also want to make a record with you. How could this be interesting? And he said, well, let's write some music together. So I started sending him these little snippets, like not even, I mean, just melody. He said, just send me melodies. So I would play melodies on the guitar. And like 2 days later, he'd send me back these little mock-ups he had done in Logic that were just deep. His sense of harmony was really interesting, his sense of texture. And so it was kind of the core band of Griff and Alan Hampton, and then Chris's sensibility in the writing. And then he said, let's add one more person. Let's add Josh Johnson, who's a alto saxophonist and keyboardist and electronics guy. He does a lot of stuff where he's triggering stuff from the sax
Mm-hmm.
and manipulating the sound. And if you're not really sure on the record, well, what is that? And so that's the record. We got together in the desert in outside of LA, this little town called Tehachapi, and Chris produced it, and we both played guitar, and everything is pretty much live. There's a couple of overdubs, but it's basically um, what you hear is more or less what went down. And we were just in a house, like I was in a room with Chris. Griffin was like in the kitchen. The bass player was in the laundry room. But we could hear each other. And when I listen to it now, it sounds very fresh because we don't have a lot of history as a band. We're just feeling it out. But because Chris and I had spent some time in the writing, going back and forth with things, I felt like the tunes were strong, and then what everybody played was just so inventive. Yeah, the bummer for me is like it's really hard. It's going to be almost impossible to get all those people to play live again. I'm going to LA this weekend, and I wanted it to be with those guys, but Griff is on tour, and but yeah, I think he's a very special drummer, and I hope that more and more people will discover him outside of Dawes, and he should be on all. Maybe he already is, and I don't know, but I feel like he should be on all kinds of records.
Yeah, I agree. He is one of the most interesting approaches to the kit that I hadn't heard in a long time. And when he was on here, they have a song called Telescope on Good Luck with Whatever, which is one of their records from a few years back. And I brought that song up. He's like, "Oh man, thank you," because everybody goes to the bathroom during that song. I'm like, I think it's one of the most hypnotic, interesting drum parts, because you could have played that a million different ways, and you threw everything caution to the wind on that song in terms of what you decided to support the song with.
Yeah.
And he just has the most interesting musical. It's the thing. It's like there are some drummers that just have a pocket, and then there are some drummers that are musically pocket. You know what I mean? They just exude music too, and not just a backbeat.
Yeah, and mostly those are my favorite drummers. I just recently got to play with a guy named Marlon Patton, who, if you don't know, you should check him out. He's like that. I tour with a singer named Liz Wright, and she's had a few different drummers in the fold. But yeah, Jack DeBow is like that. Yeah, I mean, I love a good backbeat, but I love music and flow. And I'll tell you, I know we're out of time, but if you want to really like see something that's to me kind of like a glimpse into where I was at 20 something years ago, I used to have an organ trio called the Cordials, and we played at this club in San Francisco called Bruno's, and it was just electric guitar, organ, and drums. And every few years on YouTube, I'll just, as a kind of a joke, I'll search like, I wonder if there's any footage of that band, because we only played for like a year. And then one time there was somebody had shot, and this is way before people had phone. I mean, some guy I don't even remember must have come in with a
camcorder, man.
Yeah, and he's moving around. It's not on a tripod. It's like the dude is like following the action. And it's pretty amazing if you go on YouTube and just search Bruno's Cordials, San Francisco. And that was a glimpse into the scene of that time.
Awesome.
And that drummer that I had in that band was one of the first drummers I played with who did the thing that you're talking about. I mean, his backbeat is great, but it's just music. His name is Jim Cassis. I think he's a very underknown. He didn't play on a lot of records, but he's irresistible. His drumming is irresistible.
I'll check it out. I can't wait to hear this record, because I mean, just from what you're describing, it sounds like it's going to be right up my alley. I can't wait to hear it.
Great.
All right, so let me do the lightning round get down so I can get you out of here.
Okay.
You can rest your mouth. We're going to cruise at an altitude of 112 BPM for some suspense.
Ooh.
Don't ask me why that BPM. It just is. It's always been that way, apparently.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you 10 questions, Adam, and you can, if you want to, you can explain your answers. If you don't want to, just burn right through them. Either way is fine.
Okay.
The first one is always the same. Lennon or McCartney?
McCartney.
Telly or 335?
Ooh. 335.
Pineapple on pizza?
Never.
Bill Evans or Keith Jarrett?
Bill Evans.
All right, you got a Princeton 10-inch speaker or 12-inch speaker?
10.
Zeppelin or Jethro Tull?
Ooh. Wow. Well, Zeppelin. Yeah.
Okay. Mac or PC?
Mac.
All right, you're on death row. You have a final meal. What's your final meal?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess if I don't have to worry about my cholesterol at that point, um, I would get down with some Jewish soul food. I would have like matzo ball soup and potato latkes, potato pancakes with applesauce and sour cream, and and Dr. Brown's celery soda. This soda that's flavored from celery seeds. Probably sounds terrible to most people, but for me, that's like a real, yeah, that would be like Jewish soul food, and maybe like half a pastrami sandwich. I don't know if I could do a whole one after a
Why
bowl of
not?
soup, and yeah,
Go to sleep satiated, man. That's what I'm saying. You
that's
know?
true. That's true.
All right. Movie or TV series? Which would you rather do?
Movie.
All right. And here's the last one. If you could take one album and erase it from your memory, just so you can go back and experience it for the first time again, what record would that be?
Oh, that's easy. The White Album, the Beatles, the White Album.
Okay. Tell me why.
Um, because it is such a journey. Like it starts out and you think it's going to be like a rock and roll record. It's like, I think back in the USSR starts it. I know that's the start of one of the sides. I can't remember if that's the start of side one, but it's like, okay, Beatles. I know where the Beatles are coming from. I like the Beatles, but this album goes all over the place. There's some really hypnotic things. There's some really like just straight up rockers. Helter Skelter is just so rock, but then there's different orchestrations on it. There's you know horns and strings, and things are sped up and slowed down and edited, and it's kind of like it's somehow it's a straight up Beatles. There's hits on it. Blackbird is on that record. Back in the USSR is on that record. Rocky Raccoon is on that record. But there's just also some such weird stuff. And I think uh, I don't do any kind of drugs, but it would be like probably everything about it just amazes me. Like when I pick up my guitar and try to like learn the parts of songs, like it's great. There's great guitar playing on it. There's great songs, but then there's just like some stuff you're just like, what, how is this even on a record? I don't understand. And I'll mention one other record. I know I'm cheating to say this, but I kind of wish I could hear Brian Eno's Ambient One Music for Airports for the first time, because I do remember the first time I heard that, and that record also blew my mind. And it only takes 27 minutes to listen to that. The White Album you better buckle up. It's 4 sides, and it's a trip.
I'm just writing that down. I'm listening to you, but I've never heard that record. So I'm going to write that down.
Man,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, Adam, man, what a pleasure. I really appreciate your time. It really does mean a lot to me. So everybody, the new record's coming out in May, right? What date
Yeah.
in May?
I think when we were emailing back and forth, I said it was going to come out in May. It's actually coming out June 4th, but I'm dropping singles before that. So the first single comes out May 14th. It's called Lula May. And there'll be a couple of singles coming out through May. And then the album proper will be, oh, thank you. The album proper will be out June 4th.
Okay. Awesome.
And it's called Household.
Oh, perfect. It sounds like that was a super fun experience. I cannot wait to hear this. So everybody, I just popped this up on the screen. BV, thank you again for moderating the chat and everything. AdamLevy.com for folks listening on Apple and Spotify. Go check that out. Find out all the information about what's going on in Adam's world with music he's releasing, who he's on tour with, because he's done a ton. And you should go back and check it all out. You're also doing educational stuff, so I'm sure they can find out more through there too. Instagram handle at Adam Levy Guitar. That's easy enough.
Yeah.
YouTube. If you just search the man, you will find him. Trust me. And then so the Guitar Tips Pro is through Patreon, so you can go through there and learn from one of the greats on the scene right now, living legend. Anything else to say? Tell the people what you got going on, or
I mentioned Rich Hinman, who's somebody that I play with a lot. We have 2 records out. We're going to make another record this year. That's a very loose plan, but we're playing a bunch of live shows around the U.S. Coming up. We've got some. Anyway, it'll all be on my website. But
okay,
Rich Hinman plays pedal steel, and he's my brother. We've been playing music together in some way or another for 25 years or more, something like that. And we're just joined at the 5th fret or something. I don't know. We have a really special connection. So
he finishes your sentences in a way, musically speaking.
yeah, like I said this the other day, we were playing a gig, and I said on the microphone, I hope you have someone in your life that you get to do your favorite thing in the world with for decades, because that's how Rich is for me. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah,
man. Are you coming through Baltimore at all, do you think, or around this area?
not with Rich, but I will let you know if we do. Where would we play? I don't know where to play in Baltimore.
There's this cool new jazz club called Keystone Corner.
Okay.
Sco's played there.
Okay.
Bunch of people have actually come through there. It's a really cool little joint in this place called Harbor East, which is like a kind of built up fancy part of Baltimore, but it's a cool jazz club. So I think you guys could definitely come through there.
Okay, good to know.
And let me know for sure, because I also do something called Gear Gab, which is like a rig rundown. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about gear. I wanted to, because I'm such a gear nut. But if you come through, we want to do one of those, let me know.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, Adam, thank you again so much for hanging. Everybody else, thank you for stopping in. Adam, you can hold on one sec, but everybody else, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.